guys, welcome to Pro Gun. Hammer fired or striker fired? Single action or double action? What do they mean? Do they care? What's better? Well, it's got nothing to do with what's better. It's what's best for you. And if you're new to the firearms world, you're going to hear the term hammer fired and striker fired a lot. You're also going to hear single action and double action. And I thought I would do this video for the people new to firearms so that you can determine what's best for you. Let's get into it. Okay, before we start, you can clearly see that these firearms are unloaded and safe. Now, we're going to cover the differences between hammer fired and striker fired and single action and double action, because if you're new to the firearms world, you're going to hear those terms a lot, and you should know what they mean, because when you purchase your first firearm, that may be a deciding factor on which type you go with. We'll start off with a revolver. And the hammer is an external mechanism that gets pulled back. And when you pull the trigger, it moves in a arc motion. And it hits the firing pin, which strikes the primer on the cartridge, allowing it to fire. There are no striker-fired revolvers, just so you know. Now, when it comes to semi-automatic pistols, they have a striker that looks just like this ballpoint pen insert. It's internal, and even if you take off the slide, you can't see it. You have to disassemble it to get to it. But when you rack the slide, the striker comes back, it's under spring tension, and when you pull the trigger, it goes forward, and it hits the primer on the cartridge, allowing it to fire. And then you have a hammer-fired pistol, like this. Right? You can clearly see the external hammer, and all of the hammer-fired guns have a manual safety. And you always know what position it's in because you can see it. As opposed to on a striker-fired gun, once you rack the slide, you don't know whether the slide has been racked. You can't tell because there's no external hammer to see it. So the only thing you can do is drop the magazine, rack the slide, make sure there's nothing in there, pull the trigger, and that will disable the striker. Now, one thing to note is that most of the polymer frame striker fire pistols do not have an external mechanical safety. Some do, but most don't. And basically, the safety is keep your finger off the trigger. Now, the striker-fired pistols are easier to operate because you insert the magazine, you rack the slide, that's all you have to worry about. They're also cheaper to make because there's fewer moving parts. They're typically a little bit lighter. And as far as availability, there's a huge selection of striker-fired pistols. Almost every new gun on the market now is a polymer frame striker-fired pistol. And like I said, this has really got nothing to do with what's better. It's got to do with what's best for you. If you don't feel comfortable carrying with a live round in the chamber, you may want to look into a hammer-fired gun so you could tell where the hammer is, and it does have the external safety. Now, if you're going to be carrying it, one thing to note for concealed carry is that the striker-fired guns are less bulky, and because you don't have that hammer back here, this hammer may get caught on your clothing. If your shirt gets stuck in here, right, the hammer's not going to be able to go forward enough to hit that firing pin to strike the primer of the cartridge. I also note that on the striker-fired pistols, the trigger pull seems to be more consistent. But the hammer-fired guns, there's a lot more pressure when that hammer comes down. Every once in a while on a striker-fired gun, you may get a light primer strike where it's just not enough power to crush the primer here to make the cartridge go off, but that rarely happens, but it is possible. You put them side by side again. There's nothing here to protrude to get caught in your clothing, but you do know where you stand here when the hammer is pulled back. Now, let's get into the actions. The action means is what the trigger actually does. On a single action revolver, the trigger has one action. It's to drop the hammer. Right? On a double action revolver, the trigger does two things. It cocks and decocks the hammer. Now, the trigger is a lot lighter on single action because it doesn't have to rotate the cylinder and cock the hammer, as opposed to double action is a little bit harder. That's different on pistols. Now, basically, for the most part, almost all of the pistols are single action. There are a few double action, but the double action pistols, when you pull the trigger, it cocks and decocks it automatically, but there's really not a lot of them out there. Now, technically, pistols are single action the first time only, because when you rack the slide, it pulls back the striker. When you rack the slide, it pulls back the hammer, right? And after the first time you fire it, the gas blows the slide back and pulls back the striker. The same thing on this. Every time you pull the trigger after the first time, the gases blow the slide back that pulls back the hammer. So it's technically double action, but not a true double action, because you still can't keep pulling the trigger and having the hammer go back and forth. I hope this was helpful. This may be useful in what you decide to carry. Again, if you're looking for a wide selection of firearms, you're definitely better off going with the polymer frame striker fired. Almost every gun manufactured now falls into that category. But I know it could be a little overwhelming for someone new to the gun world, so I hope this helps. Thanks for watching.